Hello, welcome to another video by the conscientious biologist, Ben Gallagher. This is the final one of 3 in the respiration series. This is only a very short one and it covers anaerobic respiration, which is a form of respiration that you would only do if there wasn't an available level of oxygen to allow you to do aerobic respiration, which is what your body really wants to do. This video is aimed at GCSE level, and as always, if you like what you see, if you enjoy this way of learning, please do subscribe to my channel. So let's very quickly just recap aerobic respiration, but only by looking at the equation that I've thrown back up on there on the diagram. You've got glucose and oxygen that will react together to give you carbon dioxide and water and to give you the energy back out of that glucose. That's the whole purpose of aerobic respiration, to try and release all that energy that was locked up in the glucose molecules during photosynthesis. However, sometimes your cells can't get all the energy that they need in order to do full aerobic respiration. So what if the oxygen isn't there? If the oxygen isn't there and you haven't got oxygen atoms to combine with the carbons and the hydrogens in glucose molecules, then you're not going to be able to make the carbon dioxides and water, so they disappear as well. So in anaerobic respiration, the glucose is converted into a different molecule. That molecule is called lactic acid. Now, when you do that conversion of glucose into lactic acid, and you'll notice now the title has changed to anaerobic respiration because that's the whole equation. When you do this conversion, you get less energy than you would by doing normal aerobic respiration. Now, less energy is still much better than no energy at all. So it's no surprise really that anaerobic respiration has stuck around in evolution, because as long as you've got a bit more of an advantage over the other things around you, then you're more likely to survive. And having less energy, even if it's very little energy from the glucose molecules, is still much better than not being able to get any more energy out of it if there wasn't oxygen around. So this mechanism allows you to get some energy, which is certainly still going to increase your survival chances. Now, the problem with this is that lactic acid is really bad for the muscles, and your body won't let you build up too much, or it's going to start to really damage your muscles. So you need to get rid of that. Because of that, you can't do anaerobic respiration for long. And because lactic acid is broken down by oxygen, or rather it's flipped back into glucose, which then needs to be broken down by oxygen, your body builds up an oxygen debt. In other words, your body allows you to do anaerobic respiration for a short amount of time to allow you to get enough energy to perhaps escape a predator. But in allowing you to do that, your body is saying, you're going to owe me oxygen so that I can get rid of this lactic acid, which has been built up. So that term oxygen debt is really important. You must repay that oxygen debt. This is why you breathe very hard after anaerobic exercise, like sprinting. When you're sprinting, it's such an explosive thing that your muscles are pumping really hard. Their demand for energy is massive, but you can't breathe very hard when you're sprinting. Most sprinters are holding their breath most of the time that they're sprinting, especially in the 100-meter sprint. So when they finish, because they've been doing anaerobic respiration during that sprint, they tend to really pant and breathe hard at the end of it to get that oxygen back into their body, to pay back that oxygen debt, to get rid of that lactic acid. Now, everything that's on the screen there is true of what happens in animal cells. There are some other types of cells that do this, but we should really say at this point, everything here is about anaerobic respiration in animal cells. On the next slide, we're going to look at how anaerobic respiration can differ in some different organisms. So you might want to take a screenshot of this before we move on to the other organisms. So if I put up there straight away the one we've just talked about, the animal anaerobic respiration, which is glucose to lactic acid to release some of the energy. But remember, it's less energy than you would normally get. Now, that also happens in some bacteria, not all bacteria, but one useful example of bacteria doing exactly this form of anaerobic respiration is in making yogurts. So if you think about that slightly sour, sharp taste of yogurts, quite often masked in a lot of the yogurts you can buy in shops because they pile loads and loads of sugar into them. But the natural flavour of yogurt is actually very sour and acidic because the bacteria that are in the milk that have reacted within the milk to turn it into that thick yogurt have also released lactic acids, and it's that acid that you're tasting in that quite sour yogurt. So it's animals and some bacteria. But fungi are really, really useful to us because of how they do anaerobic respiration. And the main type of fungi that you might be familiar with, or certainly for this process, is yeast. When I say fungi, instantly in your head you might be thinking mushrooms. Okay, but this isn't, we're not talking about those in this process. We're talking about yeast, which is a microscopic fungi, a single-celled fungi. A yeast take glucose, they still need to get the energy out of it, that's why they are doing this process. But yeast produce a little bit of carbon dioxide as well, not as much as would be produced through aerobic respiration, but they produce some carbon dioxide, but they also produce ethanol. Ethanol is the proper word for alcohol. So you've probably heard of this process, but under its proper name, which I'll put on the arrow there, which is fermentation. Fermentation is the process by which almost all commercial alcoholic drinks that you can buy, that's how the alcohol was made. So all of the alcoholic drinks, beers, wines, even spirits, because the alcohol in spirits is still made by fermentation. It's just then distilled to concentrate the alcohol. But if you think of beers and wines, to make those, they put yeast into the mix. The yeast used sugars from whatever was put into the mix. In the case of wine, the sugars come from grapes. In the case of beer, it comes from molten grains. But the glucose that's in the grapes, that's in the malt, can be converted into carbon dioxide and ethanol. That's why they're alcoholic drinks. But that's not the only thing that we use fermentation for. We actually use fermentation in bread production. I'm sure you all know that you use yeast in making bread, but that's not because of the alcohol. We're not trying to make alcoholic bread here. It's because of the carbon dioxide. When you mix the yeast through the dough, because it's trapped inside the dough, it can't get a lot of oxygen, so it respires anaerobically. Yes, it produces ethanol, and that's why rising dough smells a bit alcoholic, but it's actually the bubbles of carbon dioxide that make the bread dough rise. And then when you cook it, those bubbles of carbon dioxide are what give you the nice bubbly light texture of bread. If you look at the picture of bread there, you can see the bubbles and the sort of air holes that are within it. So we use anaerobic respiration of fungi to make alcoholic drinks and to make bread. So those are two key examples of anaerobic respiration in other organisms. Now lastly, just to close up this unit, we need to talk about the role of the liver in anaerobic respiration. Now the liver I've put on the diagram above me here, and I've circled it in a yellow circle so you can see exactly where the liver is. The liver is your largest internal organ. It's not your largest organ because your skin is your largest organ. It covers your entire body. It's actually quite heavy, but your liver is your largest internal organ. It performs a great many functions, including detoxifying poisonous substances like alcohol. It's why alcoholics often get liver failure, because their liver is having to work so hard. It breaks down old blood cells to recycle the iron that's in the hemoglobin. So your red blood cells, once they get old and worn out, they'll go to your liver will break them down, but it will keep hold of the iron because that iron can be reused. Your liver makes bile for use in digestion. If you think back to your digestive system unit, you know that bile emulsifies fats. It also neutralizes stomach acid. Well, that bile is made by the liver. Your liver also makes urea, but it makes this from excess amino acids. Amino acids you get from eating protein. And if you eat too much protein or take protein shakes or anything like that, if you're taking loads of protein that your body doesn't need, your liver has to work quite hard to break that extra protein, those extra amino acids down, and it turns it into urea. The urea is then filtered out of the blood by your kidneys, diluted, and that's what urine is. So having a massive excess of protein is actually quite a bad thing because it makes your liver work really, really hard. Okay, but, and this is the key bit for this lesson, in anaerobic respiration, the liver also has to deal with the lactic acid that's created by muscles. So if you've done a load of anaerobic respiration, you've just done, let's say, a 400-meter sprint, your muscles are screaming with lactic acid. They're in a lot of pain. That lactic acid is going to go into your blood. It's going to travel to your liver, and your liver's got a couple of options as to what it can do with it. Firstly, it's going to convert it back into glucose. Then it has to either break it down by aerobic respiration, and that's why you must breathe and breathe and repay that oxygen debt, so your liver can break that excess glucose down, the leftover that was the result of the anaerobic respiration, so you can break it down. You need to repay that oxygen debt. Or your liver can convert the glucose into polymers of glycogen for storage. We said in the previous lesson that in response to exercise, your body needs to release more glucose from the muscles or the liver. Well, you can restore some of that glucose in the liver and turn it back into glycogen. But either way, it's the liver that's having to do a lot of the work here. So that's it for this lesson. It was just a really short one, but you've actually just hit a really, really crucial part of the course. You've covered pretty much all of the vital concepts, but there's a video that I've put together here. It's called What Do Cells Need? And it's a summary and overview of cell biology. That video is a really, really important one. It's going to link together almost everything that you've done so far before we can go on to the last kind of concept of, now that we know all that, we know how cells function, what did that then cause on the planet? So there's a lot more still to go, but this is a really key milestone point. Please do watch this video to try and link it all together. As always, please do subscribe to my channel if you enjoy this. That'll alert you every time I put a new video on there. And please like this video if it's something you've enjoyed and something you'd like to see more of. Thanks.